Enron started in 1985 as a relatively small energy company created by the merger of Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. But under the leadership of CEO Kenneth Lay, Enron rapidly grew into a corporate titan. Lay had a vision, one that would push Enron beyond the energy sector and transform it into a global powerhouse. Enron didn't just trade in oil and gas. It pioneered a new business model focused on energy trading, commodifying electricity and other energy resources. The company expanded aggressively, earning billions and gaining a reputation as one of the most innovative businesses in the world. By the late 1990s, Enron was a darling of Wall Street, with its stock price soaring. Enron's success, however, wasn't entirely built on solid ground. As we'll soon see, it was a house of cards waiting to collapse. The masterminds of deception: Kenneth Lay, Jeffrey Skilling, and Andrew Fastow. Kenneth Lay was the visionary, but Jeffrey Skilling, the company's president and COO, was the architect behind Enron's most aggressive and ultimately disastrous strategies. Under Skilling's leadership, Enron began using complex accounting practices to hide its mounting debt. One of the most notorious methods was the use of mark-to-market accounting, a technique that allowed Enron to record potential future profits as if they were already earned, regardless of whether those profits ever materialized. But Skilling wasn't alone in orchestrating this financial manipulation. Enron's CFO, Andrew Fastow, created an elaborate web of off-the-books partnerships and shell companies. These entities were designed to hide Enron's losses and make the company appear far more profitable than it was. For a time, this deception worked. Enron stock soared, peaking at $90.56 per share in August 2000. Employees and investors alike poured their money into Enron stock, believing in the company's promise of endless growth. What they didn't know was that the entire foundation was crumbling beneath them. The cracks begin to show. By the early 2000s, signs of trouble were starting to emerge. Analysts and reporters began questioning Enron's financial statements, pointing out inconsistencies that couldn't be easily explained. Inside the company, a few brave voices raised concerns about the dubious accounting practices, but they were quickly silenced. One of these voices was Sharon Watkins, an Enron vice president who eventually became a whistleblower. In August 2001, she sent an anonymous letter to Kenneth Lay, warning him that the company was on the verge of collapse. Her concerns were ignored. At the same time, Skilling, who had been appointed CEO earlier that year, suddenly resigned, citing personal reasons. His departure sent shockwaves through the business world, and Enron's stock began to plummet. The crash and the aftermath. By October 2001, the walls were closing in. Enron was forced to admit that it had overstated its earnings by nearly $600 million over the past 5 years. The SEC launched an investigation, and investors started fleeing in droves. On December 2nd, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy, marking the largest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history at the time. The company's stock, which had once been worth over $90 per share, was now virtually worthless, trading at less than $1. The collapse of Enron had devastating consequences. More than 20,000 employees lost their jobs. Many of them had invested their life savings and retirement funds in Enron's stock, believing in the company's future. Now, they were left with nothing. Their pensions evaporated, their livelihoods destroyed. The ripple effect extended far beyond Enron's employees. Thousands of shareholders, including major institutional investors, lost billions. Trust in corporate America was shattered, and people began to question whether any company could be trusted. Personal stories of loss and despair. The human cost of the Enron scandal cannot be overstated. People like Janice Farmer, who had worked for Enron for over 20 years, saw her retirement dreams evaporate. Her 401k, once valued at $700,000, was wiped out in the blink of an eye. Farmer wasn't alone. Thousands of other employees faced similar fates. Many had been encouraged to invest heavily in Enron stock, assured by company leaders that the future was bright. They trusted their employers, and in return, they were betrayed. The financial devastation wasn't the only consequence. Many former Enron employees struggled to find new jobs, their reputations tarnished by their association with the company. Depression, anxiety, and taking one's own life followed in the wake of the collapse. The scandal left a deep psychological scar on those who were caught in its wake. The criminal investigation and trial. As the dust settled, the hunt for justice began. Kenneth Lay, Jeffrey Skilling, and Andrew Fastow became the faces of corporate corruption. In 2006, Lay and Skilling were convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and insider trading. However, Lay died of a heart attack before sentencing, while Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison, though his sentence was later reduced. Andrew Fastow, the mastermind behind Enron's financial shell games, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. His cooperation with prosecutors helped to bring down many others involved in the scandal. The Enron trial was a spectacle, watched closely by millions who had been affected by the company's downfall. But while the convictions provided some measure of accountability, they couldn't undo the damage that had been done. The ripple effect on corporate America. The Enron scandal sent shockwaves through the business world and prompted widespread changes in corporate governance and accounting practices. In 2002, the U.S. Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a sweeping piece of legislation designed to protect investors from corporate fraud. Sarbanes-Oxley introduced new regulations that required greater transparency and accountability from public companies. CEOs and CFOs were now required to personally certify the accuracy of their financial statements, and penalties for corporate fraud were increased. While these reforms helped to restore some confidence in the markets, the question remained: could another Enron happen again? The lessons learned and the legacy of Enron. The fall of Enron serves as a cautionary tale of what happens when corporate greed goes unchecked. It's a reminder that no company, no matter how successful, is immune to the consequences of unethical behavior. But perhaps the most heartbreaking lesson is that it wasn't just the executives who paid the price. The real victims were the employees who lost their jobs their savings, and their sense of security. They trusted Enron, and that trust was betrayed. The Enron scandal changed the way we view corporate accountability, but it also left behind a legacy of broken promises and shattered lives. The human cost of corporate greed. The Enron scandal is more than just a financial disaster. It's a human tragedy. It's a story of what happens when the pursuit of profit is placed above all else. It's about the lives that were destroyed, the families that were torn apart, and the dreams that were crushed. As we look back on the Enron scandal, we must remember that the true cost of corporate greed isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in human lives. The question we must ask ourselves is, have we learned our lesson? Or are we still vulnerable to the same forces that brought Enron to its knees? Enron may be gone, but its legacy lives on. It serves as a stark reminder that behind every corporation, there are real people. People whose lives can be forever altered by the decisions made in boardrooms far removed from their everyday struggles. The Enron scandal is a story of greed, betrayal, and ultimately, the resilience of those who were left to pick up the pieces. What do you think? Could another scandal like Enron happen again? How do you feel corporate accountability has changed since then? Or has it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions on whether companies today are more transparent or if the risks are still there. If you found this story compelling, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing for more deep dives into corporate scandals and the human stories behind them. And if you know anyone who'd be interested in learning about the rise and fall of Enron, feel free to share this video with them. Thanks for watching, and remember, behind every corporation are real people. Let's not forget their story.